All right, we are live. Hello, everyone watching at home. My name is Tim Meyer. I am here as one of the editors for one of I'm starting to hear feedback for myself. I'm one of the editors of Never Wake, the Dream Horror Anthology, along with Kenneth Cain. Figured tonight we would come on and do a quick Q&A and just talk a little bit about the anthology and just like some writing stuff. So figure we'll introduce ourselves first. Lee Murray, starting with you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Lee Murray and I'm an award-winning writer, editor, poet from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's wonderful to be here as part of this panel talking about the Never Wake anthology. So thank you for having me. I'm coming to you from Tuesday lunchtime.
Kenneth Cain.
I'm Kenneth W. Cain. I'm an author and freelance editor, and I basically work for a bunch of publishers and do whatever I can, and it's my thing.
Philip?
Yeah, Philip Fracassi, an author, screenwriter, and excited to be here.
Sina?
Hi, I'm Cynthia Pelayo. I'm an award-winning, International Latino Book Award-winning author and a three-time Bram Stoker Award-nominated author. I'm a writer.
She's an amazing writer. She's a fantastic writer.
Thank you, Lee. I'm a writer and a poet, and I'm just happy to be here.
Excellent. Cool. So yeah, I like previously mentioned, we're here kind of supporting the Never Wake Kickstarter. The link for the Kickstarter is actually in the description on the YouTube page. So if those of you watching at home want to check it out, the link is there. We have a bunch of bundles still available. And also it's a good way to pre-order the hardcover or paperback version of the anthology. Ken, do you have anything you wanted to add regarding the anthology before we get to some questions?
Well, we're excited about it. I mean, we're hoping to get it funded and get. We have a couple of stretch goals we've just added and a bunch of new add-ons. Hopefully, it'll be able to get it funded and get our stretch goals achieved too. That would be great.
That would be great.
Make this an excellent book.
Cool. So starting off, before we get to the audience and their questions, which, by the way, those of you watching, if you want to just flood the comment section with questions for us, please do that, and I will be monitoring them throughout the night. But to start us off, I have, what is your favorite dreamy, surreal, trippy horror movie or book? I know for me, like the classic Nightmare on Elm Street is always going to be like one of my top favorite things of all time. So it's just been a huge inspiration for me. But Philip, what do you have? Anything in particular?
I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to think of if there's a book or a movie or whatever that was like set in like a dream state. The only thing I can think of is the Matheson book, What Dreams May Come, which was a wonderful book and a wonderful movie and very trippy movie with Robin Williams. So that's the first one that comes to mind as far as like that kind of. It's not really horror, but it is trippy for sure. Probably the most classic example that I'm thinking a little more would probably have to be Brazil, right? That would have to be like the ultimate trippy dream movie. Though arguably how much of it was a dream and how much of it was real, I don't know. But that Brazil has always been one of my favorite movies, so that would be one that I would definitely pull up. Yeah,
those are good choices. Sina?
It's no secret that I'm just obsessed with The Nightmare on Elm Street. That was the first That was like the first horror movie I watched. I was 5 years old and my parents left the house and they left my older brother to babysit me. And it was like 1986, 87. So it had just come out on video. And my brother was watching A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I remember the slow dream sequence when they are in high school. And that kind of still sticks with me. Remember and she gets dragged with the body bag.
The bag.
So yeah. So A Nightmare on Elm Street and then Dream Warriors is going to be the other one that really just sticks with me. So I'm all things obsessed.
Was Dream Warriors 3 or 4?
3.
Or which one was Dream Warriors?
3.
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, that was a good one.
When Heather Langenkamp comes back, so great.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Yeah. I'm gonna age myself a little bit. But I saw that in the theater, and we had to sit on the floor. This is when people didn't care about fire codes, and we had to sit we were sitting on the floor in the aisles because the theater was sold out and everybody was going crazy for it. That was a fun experience.
It was a fun one. So those two still just stick with me, and I'm like all things obsessed with that franchise. That's like my dream to like touch that franchise somehow.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. They should bring back the novel series that they had. They had like
they used
briefly.
to.
I think it was like early 2000s or maybe like late 90s. They had it's a novel. Yeah, I would definitely kill to do one of those. That'd be awesome.
We're gonna manifest it, Tim.
Yes.
We're gonna manifest it for us. We're gonna do it. Let's say we're gonna do it.
Lee, what about you? Anything stand out for you?
Well, you know, as far as movies go, I'm going to admit that I'm not a big watcher of horror movies because as I growing up, I suffered from night terrors, you know, so the real life problem when you have a vivid imagination and you watch something very evocative and very scary, and then that basically you relive it for the rest of your life. I think I watched Trilogy of Terror, and that basically scarred me for life. And then The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, even going back that was one of the first horror movies I ever saw, and it was just terrifying. So I'm one of those people that kind of lives a little bit more in books. I'm watching a bit more because I'm writing some screenplays now, and so you know, I have to go there and inform myself. But one of the things I think is stories like, you know, Madge Piercy's Woman at the Edge of Time. Now, a lot of people will say that's not horror, but for a woman and someone who suffers from mental health issues, that is really a story of horror, you know, of feminist horror. And to me, a lot of the really insightful things are done through hallucinations and dream sequences, which I think is an interesting way to look at sort of those internal processes that are going on when you're suffering from a mental illness, or maybe you're not. I mean, that's the whole point about the book. And so I think the thing about the whole idea of dreams, though, is that it touches people as Sina said earlier. You know, it's because we all dream, we all sleep, and we all dream and have nightmares. It's something that all of us can tap into and have had experience with. So, you know, there's no one that hasn't been touched by a bad dream or a daydream or a hallucination of some sort. And so to me, this is just as soon as you know, Tim and Kenneth sent me, you know, the premise for this anthology, I kind of thought, oh well, yes, I need to jump on this, because such a universal idea that we're all so embroiled in at some point or another in our lives.
Awesome. Well, what was the name of that book that you mentioned?
It's a really old book from the 70s. It's called Woman on the Edge of Time. It's a classic. Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's a classic. It's been a long time. I think I read it in high school the first time. So and I'm probably the oldest here.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes of all of these things so I can go back and buy them later. That's why I asked this question.
It's funny though, because you know, you can't really, it's interesting, you have to really go all in or not at all if you're doing a dream thing, right? Because if you dip your toe in the water, you're sort of cheating, you know, you're sort of doing the Dallas last episode, again, I'm aging myself, the last episode of Dallas when it was all a dream. But but I think like with Nightmare on Elm Street, it's like, it's all in, like that's the whole thing. That's the deal. It's the dream stuff. So I never, it always kind of bothered me when you'd have a movie or a TV show. And there was a TV show recently that was very well done, had Dan Stevens in it, Legion, I think it was called Legion, a couple years ago. And he was like insane. But some of the stuff I don't like about the insane stuff or the hallucination stuff is I don't mind you having really bizarre things happening in the story or in the story world. I don't like the whole like, oh, is it real? Is it not real? Is it in his mind? Is it not? Some of that stuff, it's like, it's more frustrating for me as a viewer and or a reader. I like just if you're gonna be weird, be weird. But I think that's why I say I think you got to go all in with like the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, which is the whole like that's the whole point, is he attacks people in dreams. So I do think that's I do think that's a factor. But I'm very curious to see what people come up with for the anthology, because I think there's a lot of things that are unexplored that can be explored in the kind of hallucinatory dream state.
That Legion was pretty well done though overall. I mean,
it was really well done. It was really well acted too. He was great.
You know what movie I really like, and this is probably more dark fantasy than horror, is Dreamscape from the 80s.
Oh yeah, dude.
I love that actually.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
Randy Quaid or Dennis Quaid.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Dennis
that was
Quaid.
a good one.
And he was
The other
like,
brother.
he's like so young back then.
Yeah. That was a classic.
What?
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Love that movie.
It's classic.
And that was one of those things where the dreaming was they weaponized it, and that was interesting.
Right.
And then of course we're kind of most recent obvious example would be the DiCaprio movie, which I'm blanking on.
Oh, Inception.
Inception, where the whole thing
Yeah.
is they're weaponizing dreams. So weaponizing dreams is another thing that I think is really a really interesting concept.
Which is
fun.
interesting because the whole thing about like having a dream, a story start with a dream, for instance, has become rather cliche, and then yet you have all these
Right.
ideas now coming out of it. It'd be interesting to dive back into it.
Yeah, I know it's frowned upon to open a story or with a dream, but something about it that I find alluring. Because
Right.
I think I like starting a story where I like misleading the reader a little bit. I think it's fun to kind of make you think you're in one thing is happening and then it's not. I think it's a fun way to open it. But you can't overdo it, and obviously it's become a bit of a trope. So you think,
I like
small
it.
spoonfuls.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think when I started writing, they told me that as soon as you put a dream in, then the story, the publisher will say, "Nah, you can't sell that story." That it's a kind of a cheat internal aspect. But actually, I think that it's a really good opportunity for opening up kind of those indigenous cultural concepts, because a lot of that is done through dream sequences, and even in the oral. In oral stories, a person such and such, or the gods came to him in a dream, and so it's a very good place to introduce those very vital concepts and sort of which are more inclusive in our storytelling. So I think that's something that we should never discount just for that very important aspect.
Yeah, the religion thing is interesting because it kind of bleeds into visions, right? The dream, is it a dream or is it a vision, is kind of fascinating. And I think the reason that people don't like that to put dreams in story, and I do this, so I'm sorry, everybody, but is that sometimes you want to pinch the reader or the viewer, you want to spike, you want to grab their attention, and if the story doesn't allow for maybe something super scary or horrific to happen, then and you'll see this in horror movies all the time, which is like you cut to a scene and like they're in bed and they're being butchered and they wake up and they're like, oh my god, it was a horrible dream. But you're re-engaging with the audience because you're like basically saying, come pay attention, we have more, we have more to go. So it's kind of a cheat, but whatever. I use the tools that are given.
I've always liked it as a tool though, because I could get boring explaining a character's thoughts, and like with a dream sequence, you can like visually give your audience their thoughts and just do it in like a visual manner. So like I never really saw it so much as cheating, just like you kind of said, it's just like a tool to kind of bring those thoughts out into a visual
how
way.
Summer starts, isn't it? It starts with a dream sequence kind of.
Yeah, well, that whole book is like a dream sequence.
Yeah, but I think it is. It like you say, it's a technical device sometimes just to provide the backstory. Where is the character's trauma coming from? So you've got that, but you've also got the where are they going? If you want to foreshadow some kind of prophecy. I know lots of dark fantasy series use the dream sequence as a. I mean, you could consider the hologram as the technological version of the dream sequence, if you like, as for foreshadowing what might happen or where the story is going to go, what the prophecy is for the poor, accidental hero, so to speak.
Cool.
There's this comment that I'm over here nodding. It says, I appreciate the comment on cultures that you brought up. The comment on cultures and dreams from Lee. In Slavic mythology, certain creatures only attack in dreams. And so I think that is important to kind of highlight that there's a lot of cultural
richness and layering. Yeah.
There are, I mean, growing up, I'm Puerto Rican, and so growing up, it was just part of the discussion. Like, you would hear someone say that someone dreamt of something, and it was a prophecy. And so there was still a lot of there's still a lot of superstition now, but at least growing up, I grew up in a very superstitious family that still believed in things like demons and possession and spirits, and that dreams were a connection to another reality that we were not yet able to fully comprehend. So at least things that you saw and I personally have aphantasia. So I don't have a mind's eye. I can't imagine. I can't think in pictures. So I only see black all times. I think it's only like 2% of the population experiences. So when I dream at night, it's the only time I can ever see things in my imagination. So for me, dreaming is much more exciting than someone that does have a visual imagination. If you tell someone to picture an apple, many of you might visually conjure up an apple in your imagination. I don't have that ability. And so for me, dreaming it's magic.
And it's that, and it's also one of the times you're most vulnerable in life.
Yeah.
So it's like you can achieve anything, but you're super vulnerable and monster. Like I remember when I was a kid, your parents would be like, "Go to sleep," or or somebody's going to get you, or like on Christmas Day, go to sleep, or Santa will get you. And then you're like, who wants to go to sleep then?
Cool. All right, so I figure we could pivot from the dream stuff just into like a general writing question, since this is an anthology. I have, what's your approach to writing for an open call or an invite? And is it different, the same? Or do you approach like short stories all the same, or does it depend? Lee, just because your face is next to mine, we'll start with you first.
It's look, when you get invited to an anthology on a specific theme, first of all, it's really exciting. As a working writer, it's really nice to be invited to be involved in works. Anthologies are wonderful community building projects, and you get an opportunity to sample, a real range of writers, which is always fun. But I always think, often I say, would you like something specifically New Zealand or, cultural from me? Because I think that's often why people approach me, is for those kinds of stories. And often I'll get a yes. But the real trick is not writing the same story that everyone else is writing, isn't it? It's not the first thing you think of. You need to think of, well, what's the second thing that other people aren't necessarily writing? So So that's kind of what's my point of difference. So that's kind of where I usually jump in with sort of an anthology call. But usually it's like, oh my God, someone has invited me. That's usually the big deal. That opportunity to write without having to, face the 400 rejections before you've actually sold a story. So actually having some guidance of this is the theme, this is the premise, where are you going to take it is always really exciting to me.
Kenneth?
Well, I don't get a lot of invites like that, but for the ones I do, I certainly keep notes on every idea I have. So I have this massive book of notes on my computer that and so when I get an invite, I usually try to make sure I have an idea right away, try to make things click, and make sure I have a story idea that I can run with that I think will be successful before I even start. Otherwise, I have said no at times because I couldn't come up with an idea. So,
Philip?
Yeah, for me, it's my approach is different. I think every time, depending on what the invitation is calling for. I've like this year, I did one anthology that was based on a Shakespearean play, and that was very difficult because you had to basically think of something very modern and entertaining and scary that would tie into Shakespeare. Sounds easier than it is, but what I did was I ended up just I had King Lear, and this is in that Shakespeare's Unleashed book, and what I did was I read the play. I actually watched a dramatization of the play. It's really just hunting for kind of an acorn that I could grab onto and build from. So I wasn't trying to recreate the entire story of King Lear, but I was kind of like, what's interesting to me? What's an incident or a character that's interesting to me that I think I could do something with? So that was how I approached that, and I ended up, I ended up kind of focusing in on, one aspect of that story versus trying to just, and then like I had a invite that was really fun. Which was a monsters based anthology, and I was given the Blob, right? I chose the Blob, and that was really fun because for me it was like taking something that I really loved and had a kind of a passion about, everyone loves the Blob, and trying to create something really fresh with it, and that hadn't been done before. So that was an exciting challenge. So I had a lot more fun with that one, I think. I don't know if which stories necessarily came out better, but so I think you approach each one a little bit differently. With your guys, with this one, it's pretty broad in a lot of ways. Like you can kind of do anything as long as it's dreamy, hallucinatory. So it's a pretty wide open field. So I might think more about ideas that I've had and would they sort of fit this versus trying to come up with something from scratch, because it's pretty broad, whereas like the Blob is very specific about the Blob. So I think each time it's a little bit different. I do prefer writing my own stories. I like having an idea and getting excited about it and writing about it. I'm more passionate about that, whereas the anthology stuff is very fulfilling, and at the end of the day it's always a great exercise for a writer, and a lot of times you end up writing something that you would never have written before, so it can be a really great challenge, but it's a lot more fun when you wake up with an idea or you have an idea and you're like, oh, I want to write about that. I'm really, it's really catching fire in my brain. But they all have their kind of like their pluses and minuses.
Cool. Sina?
The same thing that Lee said. My fear is always that I'm going to write something that someone else has written when we're invited. So I'm writing for 4 open invitations right now, and so I have like 4 different levels of like paranoia, and I keep emailing the editors to ask. I just emailed one of the editors actually before this call to say, has anyone done this idea, because this is the idea I want to do. And so at least for this one, I mean, when you told me the topic, I was like, there's no way I'm going to say no, because everyone knows that this is like my obsession, this entire area to explore. And I just think that there's just so much that can be explored. I think people just miss like dream sequences and in fiction, or just like maybe we've just seen it so much, and so maybe it's just time to do something fresh and different with it, and maybe that's exciting. I mean, I'm always open to and ready to do something that's going to challenge what we think that we've seen before, and so that's what I'm hoping to do with this. And I think that the writers that you have are going to do exciting things with this as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people do. So.
Same. Very excited.
Yeah.
We have a
Brian,
question.
I was going to say,
Brian.
Cena, don't feel bad. I always email editors too and say, is anyone else doing this? So it's like,
Okay.
don't feel bad.
I was like,
Right.
awesome.
Well, actually, I think editors love that. They love to have some developmental input and understanding of how the thing's going to shape up. Going well. What do you say, guys? I mean, you if you got that from your authors, it's something you would welcome, right? That early input.
Yeah. I mean, you get a sense of the story, and you get an idea of what the writer's doing, and you have something to look forward to, and you can't wait to see how it turns out, So yeah, that's an exciting thing. I think that everybody would like that.
Yeah, and I think the last thing a reader wants is to read the same story, told a different way.
Yeah,
so.
And we've all handled submissions, so we know that sometimes you'll get like the same story 20 times, a slight difference,
Yeah, and I think that's where you end up with rejections, isn't it? Because people, they write a similar kind of idea, or not necessarily exactly the same, but on a similar theme, and you want the variety in an anthology. So then you'll say, well, this is a great story, but this one has this perspective. And then you've got to send out those horrible rejection letters, which everyone hates. It's the worst part of being an editor. But so any author that will come to you and ask you, this is what I'm thinking, and am I on the right track, or is there too much already? Is there already something along these lines? Oh, well, that's a real boon, because you can shape the anthology, from the very earliest stages.
Yeah.
That's a good point. All right. Brennan asks, since you've all edited, there was a discourse going around earlier that an author should never start with dialogue or start a story with dialogue. What are your thoughts on that?
I saw that. Can I jump in? Because I saw that, and I really wanted to jump into the Twitter discourse, but then I was just so swamped with work all day. And so I figured if I jump into this discourse, there goes the rest of my day. But I am really hesitant with the nevers. Never do this, never do that. So I am very, very, very hesitant with anyone saying that this is the only way to create a piece of art. So that's my short answer to that.
Yeah, I've never heard of this rule. It must be a rule that some MFA class came up with, because I love starting stories with dialogue. I don't think there's a better way to get a reader engaged right off the bat than having a line of dialogue like, what the hell is in your hat? I'm reading the rest of that story. This is like the hat was brown. So, whatever. Like, nothing wrong with opening a story with dialogue. That's a stupid rule.
Yeah, some of those famous opening lines, if you read them, there are heaps of them that start with dialogue, and you're straight into the character's perspective. So I don't see an issue there. Whatever works for the story is what works, right? I mean,
Some of these rules are like, it's like telling a painter what colors to use. It's like telling a musician what chords to play in. It's like it's none of your business. It's like, it's my story. I'm going to write it how I want to write it, and that's why it's a a passionate thing for so many people, because it's an expression of yourself. It's your voice. It's art. So I'm not a big fan of these kind of rules.
That's actually what I was taught in college, was to never start with dialogue. So I'm actually familiar with that.
See, I never went to college, so I'm smart.
I don't personally use a never thing though. Like for me, you got to have a hook, and possibly the reason why that comes along is because sometimes it's hard to get a good hook into the reader off of dialogue, depending on how you write it. You know what I mean? So maybe that's where it comes from. I mean, I'm sure that
and what is dialogue? Are we talking quotes? Are we talking inner dialogue? Are we talking thoughts? Like you could
right.
Haunting of Hill House technically opens with dialogue. Nobody complained about that. I mean, it's inner dialogue, it's inner monologue, but it's I don't know. It's just dumb.
Right. Yeah, I would say there's no never to anything. It's just a matter of whether or not you can pull it off, like a second person story. You know,
you don't want to use periods. Don't use periods. You don't want to use capital letters. Don't use
Don't use
letters.
present tense. You know, only writing past tense. Oh my goodness, there's so many rules.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think there should be any rules. I think you should just be able to create, and if it will find its place. I mean, if it's for a specific if it's a specific call, but let's say, well, I'm going to bring up Max Booth's pizza anthology that he did. If it's a pizza anthology, you're not going to submit a story about like cake or whatnot, for example. So I mean, as long as you're following the guidelines of someone will.
I've read a lot of stories that start off with dialogue that don't work though. So I know that there's a lot of instances where it can't work. It's just a matter.
I wouldn't necessarily start out with a 3-page monologue, but
you wouldn't start off with like a 3-page info dump. You know what I mean? So same thing.
Yeah.
But
we don't
like to, But look at
Brandon,
Pinchon, look at Pinchon, look at James Joyce. Look, I mean, come on, it's look at it's a stupid thing.
I agree.
Do what you want, Brennan. Just do what you want.
Yeah.
Do what you want.
Well, and shout out to Brennan, who's just about to put out a new novella called Noose. It's sort of Western horror and super fun. I got a sneak preview and I absolutely loved it. So I hope everyone will pick that up as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Another question from the audience. Are there any authors or specific books or movies that have influenced your writing? This is probably going to be a big one, but Lee, let's start. Do you want me to not start with you?
You guys,
want me to start?
No, you guys go ahead. Someone just knocked on my door and I'm home alone.
Oh yeah. Sure.
He's home alone.
Good luck.
I think. Look, so I'm influenced by so many people. I think that all those books that you read and you think, oh, gee, I wish I'd written that. And of course you're influenced, aren't you? You know, how many times you've read a book and said, oh, if only that was my writing, why can't I? Those are the people who influence me. And there are millions of them. There are just hundreds of them, So I'm going to say pretty much everything I've read has influenced how I write. And always I'm trying to write the best story I can. And so that hopefully the next one will be even better than the last one. And, I'm only as good as the latest piece of work, and I'm hoping always to expand my skills and the way my work resonates for people. So I'm going to say everything I read influences, and every movie I watch influences my work. And I mean, Phil just said it. He's doing the Shakespeare Unleashed story, and he went and read the novel, the play, and then he went and watched the film. I did exactly the same for my Shakespeare Unleashed story. I went and watched, I read the play again, went and watched an adaptation. It's the research you do, isn't it? Everything informs what you write. So I can't really say there's just one. I think that would be just not fair on you're a sort of an amalgamation of all your influences, aren't you?
Agreed. Kenneth, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Elise says there, because like everything I edit a lot of people's writing, and doing that you get really up close and personal with the book you're working on. And so every book I edit is like informing my writing. And just like Lee, like I'm always working to write a better story, to improve my own writing, and to just always create something better. If I was to name like books that really influenced me, I mean, really Clive Barker's work. I'm a real big fan of The Damnation Game, and I hate to name all the same people all the time, but I'm a real big fan of like The Damnation Game and the Stephen King's Dark Tower books. I like that like dark fantasy horror mix up, mashup, and stuff like that. I really like The Cipher is a great book that I really like. A fantastic book. All the old stuff, everything you can imagine, everything like Dracula, Frankenstein, all that old stuff. I really really love.
Classics.
Yeah. So I mean, but like Lee said, it just everything you read, like even a short story that you're reading on the internet will influence you.
Cool. Philip.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I enjoy reading writers that have a very unique voice. I learn a lot from writers like that. Modern writers, like there's a writer named Ralph Robert Moore who has a real knack for writing very visceral prose, it's very physical. He's got a real talent for like making you feel what he's writing, and I've learned from reading his work. I've learned from reading Laird Barron's work. Nobody really creates, I don't think, atmosphere like Laird does. I love reading poetry. Anyone, like, I think from Sylvia Plath to Charles Simic to who's the great, oh man, Anne, what's her name? Amazing poet, and I can't think of her last name.
And Sexton?
Anne Sexton, yeah. She's great. If you haven't read Anne Sexton, and you're a horror writer, go read some Anne Sexton. She's wild. So anyway, so I like reading that stuff because I love watching writers play with words. I love, for me, it's very entertaining. I was just talking on my, podcast that I host, talking to Chuck Wendig, and we were talking a little bit about this, and we were talking about, he kind of made the comment of that, to read, I'm paraphrasing, but to read carefully, or, to read studiously, and to understand if something makes you feel a certain way when you're reading it, maybe take a beat and go back and reread it from from a studious perspective, and trying to understand how they got you to feel that feeling. And we talked a little bit about a few books that did that. So I love, like to Kenneth's point, and Stephen Graham Jones and I were talking about this on the podcast. He was saying how like anything you read gets absorbed, and when you least expect it, it's going to drip out onto your own work, because it's all fodder. It's all stuff you're storing in your amazing computer of a brain. And yeah, I think it really comes out when you write, those little things that you've learned reading other people's work. So I like reading more. I'm more about prose than I am necessarily, I guess, like structure and stuff like that. I read more. I just enjoy reading how and seeing how different writers use words to get across certain emotions or atmosphere or things like that. That's something I have a lot of fun with, and I definitely use some of that in my own work.
That's a great podcast, by the way. It's called The Dark Word, right?
Yeah, The Dark Word. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I went through the whole season in like 2 days.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's season 1 is done, and season 2 is begins airing late September.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
A lot of great writers on there. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. Sina, what about you? Anything specific, books or movies that have influenced your writing?
For me, it's going to be fairy tales. My parents couldn't read to me, and so a lot of the they couldn't read English, so a lot of the stories that they would tell me when I was younger were just fairy tales that they would recount to me in Spanish. And some of the first books that I learned to read, and thus in turn I've taught my parents to read, were fairy tales, and so that always kind of stuck with me. And so recently I've been adapting fairy tales. But like current writers, I love what Alma Katsu does, like incorporating history. I think it's marvelous what she does. And I do really enjoy how Lauren Bucas layers her stories, like the Shining Girls. And so those are a few writers that I keep my eye on. And Katrina Ward, and she just layers and layers her stories. And so I think if there's a writer that's like, if they're adding multiple layers into a story, and they're making it much more complex. If there's something beyond the surface level reading, then that's what I want. I want something that I can kind of, it's almost like a ball of yarn that I'm kind of always unraveling, because I know that there's something else there. And I feel like that's why I'm attracted to fairy tales, because it's not just the surface story. There's something else within it. There's like the tragedy of the children being lost. There's the magical items in the story. And so that's what I'm always looking for. I'm looking for layers. I'm looking for like multiple meanings. I'm looking for puzzles that I need to solve.
Yeah, Last House on Needless Street.
Yes.
I spent some time trying to figure out how she pulled that off, and then my head began to hurt, so I stopped trying to figure it out, because
Kind of magical, isn't it? How they do it.
That was pretty wild. Yeah, that how she did that. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite to Cena's point. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite that layered, I guess. But in like so the way the reveals came was very, very impressive. I was going to mention also, I know Grimm's is an obvious fairy tale book, but Italo Calvino did a wonderful volume of Italian folk tales. That's worth checking out if you guys are into fairy tales.
Cool.
Can I just interrupt? I was just thinking, Phil, your writing is very visual too, and so obviously the screenplay aspect of your work kind of filters into your prose, doesn't it? And so do you see your, I mean, Cena obviously doesn't, but do you kind of see your story roll out in front of you and then kind of put it on the page? Because I know that your prose is very visual.
Yeah, I was actually, when Cena was saying that, my heart kind of had a weird palpitation.
Yeah, me too.
That's literally how that's kind of like, that's how I do it. I just kind of like write what I see, and so I can't. It's very impressive to me that Cena can do what she does. Doing it a completely different way. Because my writing is very visual, because I write I basically just writing what I'm seeing. As a matter of fact, I was working on something this past week, and I had a bit of a panic attack, honestly, because I sat down, and this doesn't happen to me a lot. And I was I just had a blank. I saw nothing, and I was reading my notes, and nothing was coming into my head. And I had like a moment, and I had to go downstairs and have a slug of scotch and sort of talk it through with my wife, because I was like, I'm kind of freaking out right now. Like, I can't see anything, and it's freaking me out. And she was like, just relax and take a breath and the whole thing, even overdoing it or whatever. But so yeah, that's exactly how I do it. I structure everything, so I know I use my different part of my brain to structure the story, but because I like having everything laid out, especially with novels. And then once I start, once I know all the beats, I'm just literally just I'm just typing what I'm seeing or hearing or whatever. That's how my brain works, I think.
It is so impressive that Cena can do it from black. So maybe that's why she writes horror, because she's just got this black, and she has to work her way out of the darkness by writing it on the page. I don't know. It's magical to me. I don't know how you do it. I think that's really inspiring.
Quickly, Brennan is saying, thanks so much. Noose is out September 4th. Yes, we're going to pick it up, Brennan. But yeah, I don't see anything. And so for a long time, I thought this was normal. And I remember in school, they would say things like in your mind's eye, or write what you see. And I always thought, this is just like in the last few years that I realized you people are walking around the world and you can see things in your head. I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. And I just thought it was like a figure of speech. Until I started finding there's like more articles and research on it, but it takes me a long time. I have to like find a picture of a tree and then looking at that picture and then write it. So I have a lot of like pictures, or like I'll watch like clips on YouTube, so I know like different things and how to describe. So I need to see the thing to describe it in my book. So it takes a long time.
But to that point, I do this. I do probably to a much lesser extent, but I do like having. Sometimes I do like having a visual of something. If I'm imagining a house, or a car or whatever. Sometimes I like I like to pull a visual off the internet just to kind of have it as a reference point, especially when I'm like describing it or whatever. And I obviously expand or twist it or whatever a little bit, but sometimes I like having those visual cues. They do help. I was also going to ask you, I'm curious because you mentioned that when you dream, you can see when you dream, right? Because one of the times I do the most writing is in that lucid dreaming state before you fall asleep and before you're fully awake. So sometimes I will purposely extend that time if I have something in my head. I'll kind of let it play all the way out, even though consciously I'm sort of half awake, but I'm sort of still kind of having that half. Can you do that? Can you do the lucid dreaming thing where you're sort of half dream state, but you kind of know you're, in bed and it's morning or that, that kind of thing?
I write when I'm very, I write very late at night. So I'm more exhausted and I guess loopy is the right way. But I still don't. So that's like the best state for me to write, like when it's really late at night, right before I'm about to fall asleep. Like I feel like everything comes out much easier then, even though I can't see it, but the flow is, it's much better. So, yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, I can certainly focus better at night than I can during the day. That's for sure.
So I write very late at night, but then I work. I have a day job, so I have to work full time. I work full time, then I take a nap, then I wake up, and then I write late at night. So, yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. All right, we have like 10 minutes left, so I have a couple more questions in the queue. I have a dream question. We can go back to dream stuff. Zachary asks, are there limits to the use of dream logic in fiction or film? Should an author be concerned about either over or under explaining more surreal or dreamlike elements in the work to the reader viewer?
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's kind of a bit above my head.
I think it's the same logic with any story. I mean, if you overdo anything or underdo it, then the story is not going to work. There has to be a balance to any story. So I think that's holds true for anything, And then, like we talked about earlier, there's really no rules to a story.
Yeah.
As long as you can pull it off.
I do feel like it depends on the nature of the story itself. Like, because sometimes I like things that are just so surreal and trippy that like you have absolutely no idea what's going on, but like I still like it. Like, have you guys ever seen the movie Climax?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the weirdest, trippiest movie. It's about like this dance studio, and it's just a rehearsal for like this big dance performance that they have going on, and the first like act of the movie is literally just a dance performance. It has absolutely nothing to do with the movie, and it's just like it's beautiful to look at, but it's also like trippy and stuff. And then in the second act of the movie, somebody poisons the punch with like some hallucinogenic, so like everybody starts like tripping out and like starts like stabbing each other. Like it's the craziest movie ever, but like it doesn't really make any sense, and it's just so trippy and dreamy that like there's like no story to it whatsoever, but like it works and I love it. Like, so I don't really like think there is an answer for this, kind of like the question we had before, where it's like,
I think you put your finger on it though, Tim, because you've basically said it worked for you, and I think the reader will bring their own perspective and their own experience to a story, and so what might be too much for one might not be for another, and so really it's the author's skill to decide how seamlessly you put that in, and readers today are very time poor, and they don't want lots of description. So some things, we don't need to describe the whole hospital, for example. People know what a hospital looks like on the inside. They know what it smells like. So often you can do some shortcuts And so, you know, I think it depends on the importance of the sequence. Is it the first time you've introduced this kind of process in your story? If it's the fifth time, you probably don't need to do all the details. So it's the when, it's the how, it's the who the readership is. There are a number of elements to think you'd probably think about to determine how much depth you need to write in this particular dream sequence.
Yeah, I think ultimately, and Kenneth said this, I think ultimately, and I'm agreeing with him, is it's however it best serves the story. You know, if you want something that's more hallucinatory, where the boundaries are more expanded, because it serves the story, then do that. If you want it more logical because it fits the story, it serves the story that way, then do that. I can think of multiple stories where I've used dream sequences different ways. I wrote a story called Mandala, and the dream sequences in that story were kind of the way that one of the characters was sort of communicating with his dead partner, and so that was sort of how I used dreams in that story. And then in my novella Sakilina, the dream sequence was sort of a nightmare that also told a little bit of, to Tim's point earlier, gave you a little insight into that person's thinking as to how he thought about his parents, and via a nightmare about those parents. So it wasn't real. You knew it wasn't real, but it kind of gave you some insight into how he thought about them. So I think you got to just do whatever's best for the story, and don't worry about these boxes. You're putting boxes around things that don't need boxes. Just do whatever you feel is right.
And Zach, I'm one of those people that love when you don't over explain things. I just don't. There's different types of audiences, of course, and different readers, but I prefer things to not be overly explained. So if it's completely bizarre and strange, without explanation, I'm not offended. I'm totally okay with it, as long as it serves what you're trying to accomplish with your story. I mean,
this is what
you can finish a story.
Right,
Come back to it, and you could let it sit for a while, and then come back to it and see if it works. You know, you don't have to make your decision after the first draft. You know what I mean? Like, I've done that, where you take the first draft, you cook it out, and then you let it sit a while, and then you go, that is garbage. Throw the whole thing away and start over. You know? I mean, I've started stories over multiple times that way for that very reason. So
I've thrown out a few novels that way.
Yeah. And I think you can do the surreal thing. Like, I mean, like, if you're talking about short stories, there's no rules. You know, you can have a story that's completely surreal and all like fragmented, and you're getting pieces of this and pieces of that, and then you could tell a story that's much more plot driven and, you know, detailed. So it's just kind of whatever serves the story that you're writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also feel like the more that you put yourself in these boxes, like it just for me, it messes with me psychologically when I'm writing. Like, I feel like the less I care about that stuff, the more productive I am, and like the better the writing actually is. So
yeah, I always refer to it as writing scared. You don't want to write scared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. All right,
just don't go to Goodreads.
Don't go to Goodreads.
All people telling you all the things you did wrong, and then you'll write scared.
That's a good point. So we have like 5 minutes left. First of all, thank you guys for all joining us here tonight, and thank you to the audience for asking so many awesome questions. I figure we could just go around one more time and just plug some other stuff that we have coming out individually, and then we can kind of finish up. So I'll go in reverse order. Tina, I'll let you go first.
Crime Scene. Pre-order my third poetry collection, please. It's out by Raw Dog Screaming Press, October 13th. So I'm going to keep like shouting that out because John and Jennifer are just so wonderful, and I like love all things Raw Dog Screaming Press. And you all can find me on Twitter. You know where to find me. I'm there. Yeah.
Philip?
Me? Yeah, I got a book coming out called Don't Let Them Get You Down with Zagava Press. That's actually sold out. And then I have a children's book that you can pre-order called Boy with the Blue Rose Heart. That is supposed to come out August 31st, but there's print delays, so that will probably be September. My debut trade novel is coming out from Skyhorse on October 18th, called A Child Alone with Strangers, a 600-page crime horror novel. My novel Gothic is coming out February 3rd from Cemetery Dance. That's a horror novel. And then I have a novel coming out July 11th from Nightfire and Orbit called Boys in the Valley. So, and pretty much all those are up for pre-order right now. I think Boys in the Valley is still lagging behind in the US, but the UK, you can pre-order in the UK, I think.
Got a lot coming out, man. You've been busy.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping at all?
No.
No dreams for you.
No. I have anxiety, insomnia, so I don't sleep much.
Same here.
Oh,
Same here.
wow. Kenneth Cain, what do you have coming out?
I have my backlist is coming out through Crossroads Publishing. Great publisher. So if you guys haven't checked them out, check them out. And at the end of this month, I have Blood in the Soil, Terror on the Wind coming out from Brigade's Gate. That's the anthology I just finished editing. So check it out. Western horror. And I think it's going to be a decent one.
Cool. Lee?
I've got a little chapbook out today from Brainchild Press about how to set goals, writing goals.
Nice.
So,
cool.
yeah, that was a bit of a fluke, wasn't it? I have Unquiet Spirits, a collection of essays by Asian women in horror with Angela Yuriko Smith, and that's coming out from Black Spot Books in February of next year. So really excited about that. That's up and available, I think, on pre-order now. A reissue of Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women coming from Raw Dog. They're doing something beautiful, absolutely stunning to release a hardcover version. So really super excited. And a few short stories and things, but mostly I've been working on some screenplays and something that I've been working on is going into production in April of next year. So that's pretty exciting for me. So a bit of a crossover. And I'm working on the poetry collection Under Her Eye with Lindy Ryan from Black Spot Books. It's a collection of horror poetry by women, so domestic horror. So. Yeah, so a few things going. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have some things that I just signed contracts for that I can't talk about yet. So I know.
Go on, just
come on.
Nah.
Just vague.
Just say it.
Say
it.
There's
it's
two
just novellas.
A small group. It is just a small group. No, there's 2 novellas probably coming out in 2023 from some cool publishers. And then I have, what else do I have? Oh, Wormwood's getting re-released next month by Crossroads Press.
Awesome.
So they'll be doing that, which will be awesome to have that back in print. And yeah, I've just been working on screenplay stuff as well, like Lee. So I've been just trying to get some stuff started with that. So and yeah, that does it. Once again, thank you guys. The link for the Never Wake Kickstarter is in the description on YouTube. So if you wanted to check it out and pick up an advanced copy, there are plenty available, and you'll help us get this thing kickstarted. So all right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone.
Tim.
And
Thanks,
no
Ken.
problem.
Thank you.
Thanks
Nice
for
to
having
see
us.
you, Lee.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Great
Guys,
to see you
nice
all.
to see you both.
Nice
All
chatting
right.
with you all. All right, bye.
Bye.